The content discussed in this episode is for educational or informative purposes only and should not be replaced by individualized professional consultations or professional medical advice.
Welcome to the Founder Series of Dr. the Podcast. This year I'm signing up for a triathlon happening in summer, and to prepare myself, in this Founder Series I'm going to be having one-on-one conversations with experts in the field, and hopefully it will keep myself accountable and nurture my community on a day-to-day. So without further ado, hope you enjoy this episode. Hi everyone. So today is the Founder Series, episode 3, and I'm very excited to speak to Mara. So Mara has a multiple hyphen career. She works in the corporate sphere, is the sports co-lead at the South Asian Heritage Month. She works with sports brand and organizations to improve their inclusion and is a mindset coach and personal trainer working with women of color. And the ethos behind this Founder Series is basically that, to speak to women of color who are in the space of physical training and basically try to aspire women to become more active. So welcome to Dr. the Podcast, Mara.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really, really excited. When I was listening to a few of the other podcasts, I was like, oh, I love this set of podcasts. I just want to listen to more and more of it. So thank you for having me and inviting me on.
Well, it's a pleasure. So in my journey of triathlon training has just begun in January. So we spoke with a nutritionist, and then we spoke with Elle about understanding what a triathlon is and knowing kind of your background. And I know you're into CrossFit, and I was thinking it's a good opportunity for us to speak about strength training. What is its space in your triathlon training? These three discipline, which is running, swimming, and cycling, do you really need to exercise with weights?
No, that's such a great question. So going back to the interview you did with Elle, she mentioned how practicing the transitions is the fourth discipline. So then I would then argue that strength training is the fifth discipline. So the disciplines just keep adding and adding. And yeah, strength training is so important. It has so many benefits to you. It prevents injury, it helps increase bone density and maintaining muscle mass, and then also protecting vulnerable joints from injury. But, that's all the sort of the medical side to it, which doesn't seem as interesting. It will help you to increase that power. You will feel your form will build and improve your imbalances in your body, and a stronger core at the end of the day will help you when you're swimming and when you're on that bike for a long time. Also, a stronger legs will give you driving power on the bike, and also if you're weak on the bike, you might find it harder to run. So the strength training will help you. I think a lot of people don't include it because they think swim, bike, run. That's it. But you only need to do it once a week. It doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be CrossFit. I mean, CrossFit might actually be a bit too much for some people because that is so high intensity for people. So it's also about finding ways in which you might want to fit it in to your day. Like, when you're on the way to work, whilst you're waiting at the bus stop or at the train, you maybe could do some calf raises whilst you're just waiting. You can subtly add them into your day, or you could do them in the morning, once you've woken up. Or another thing you could do is when you're brushing your teeth, you could stand on one leg. So that's a good way of practicing, balancing, because running is a single leg sport, so to speak. Your feet aren't both on the ground at the same time, so that helps you.
And what do you think in terms of weight, like the amount? Do I need to have like heavy weights? Do I have light weights? What do you recommend? What is something that you're doing, for example?
So for me, because CrossFit is really, really specific in terms of strength training, I am trying to increase the weights that I'm lifting very, very heavy weights. For the ordinary triathlete who isn't so keen on CrossFit,
Which is me.
you know, you could use it with resistance bands if you wanted, or with dumbbells. You know, you want a light to medium weight. You want a weight that's challenging you. You know, one that is at that level where it's not so light, but it's not so heavy that you're struggling with your form.
Yeah, makes sense. And you mentioned once a week.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
And
that would be enough.
yeah, once a week is plenty. You know, you've also got to think about how you can fit it in.
Okay, in a week, I'm able to do 5 to 6 days of training. So
Yeah.
I'm happy about that, but I'm thinking, okay, now I need to include weights. So
Yeah,
it's just something you're adding to your routine, and it's a good thing to say that, you need to be able to fit it in your routine, because we
exactly.
all have like other things to do, or we
Mm,
have like full-time jobs, families, or just, life to navigate. And so fitting in all these different type of trainings for something that it might be a bit much, right? So you're
yeah.
saying once a week is great. Okay. All right. And how long?
So I think, you know, you can it can be anything from 15 minutes to 40 minutes, 45 minutes. You know, it doesn't have to be really, really long. It can be just a really, really simple workout. 30 minutes is also fine. Like I said, you know, it's also about fitting it into your
Mm,
week. We're not full-time athletes. You
exactly.
know,
Yeah.
like you said, you've got families, we've got work, we've
Work.
got social
Yeah.
lives, and you know, to add on strength training on top of
Mm,
that, it's a lot. It's a lot. So it's
yeah.
also about, you know, that's why I'm also saying, you know, maybe how can you fit in strength training into your life? Like, for example, you know, whilst you're brushing your teeth, or
Mm,
you know, in the morning once you've woken up, can you do some calf raises? So it's about finding the little ways in which you can incorporate it into your daily life as well.
what would be areas I would focus on? Like, for example, the core, legs.
Mhm.
What about arms?
Yeah, so you know, with strength training, you can do full body workouts. You can do typical exercises that you could do, include squats,
Hmm.
deadlifts, and then lunges, and then shoulder presses, bent over rows, or dead bugs. Dead bugs are a great one for the core in particular. They seem really, really easy when you look at people doing them, but
Hmm.
they require so much coordination. And if you do it really slowly, you'll really notice the difference. But
So because I don't know what dead bugs
yeah,
is, because I'm
so
thinking dead bugs.
so the best thing I'd say is Google it, because I don't know if I'm going to be
Yeah.
describing it that
Pardon.
great. But you're lying on your back, and you've got your arms up in a
Right.
table, and then your legs up in a tabletop position.
Yeah,
And you
that's tough.
basically
Yeah.
move one arm back and the opposite leg straight in there.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's one that requires coordination.
Coordination. And
I don't know
and
if I've
balance
explained
as
it
well.
right, but
But
it's
I
probably
think I
one to
see.
Google.
That's fine. But you're on the floor, you have your legs up and your hands like up as well, and you need to
Yeah,
do
switch.
inverse. Yeah, you need to switch and be in, like, the movements are inversed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. That is the tough one. That is the tough. You have these different disciplines,
Mm,
and you want to be strong in as well. But I always wonder if it's better to focus on your strength or your weaknesses, because if you're able to do the most easiest for you faster,
mm.
then anyways you're going to struggle with your weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is it better to focus on your strengths or your weaknesses?
Yeah, so great question. I would say it's better to focus on your weaknesses. And, you know, if you don't care about the tiny details, you'll produce bad work, because the good work culminates in hundreds of tiny, tiny details, and
Hmm.
also the details that you don't really like or are your weaknesses. And successful people will sweat that tiny stuff. As much as it is really, really, it might be boring for you to do certain things like the transition practice, that will help you in the long term. It'll help you to become faster and more confident as well. But also just making sure that you are doing the things that you do enjoy. What part of the triathlon training do you really enjoy at the moment?
Okay, I have to be honest, I have not trained the transitions. So when you said that, I was like,
that's not the sexy
part.
part.
I was like, are you in my training? Like, do you know that I'm not practicing this? Are you trying to tell me something? But anyways, what I enjoy seeing more in my training is that, for example, I've noticed that I start being anxious now when I'm training like swimming, which is something I usually never had. Something that I used to enjoy starts becoming fearful.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I need to work through that. It's actually, for me, it's more of a mindset work than a physical effort. And so what I've noticed that I'm slowly gaining confidence by training, actually. So by saying that I'm tackling and I'm addressing the issue, it's comforting in certain way. Can you relate with that? Or I don't know, maybe it's just me.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, it's about leveraging that as well and using that so that when you do have days when it feels harder or you may not have the motivation, going back to that and thinking about that will really, really help you as well. And we can't always rely on motivation. And this is why,
Definitely.
discipline and routine will really help, especially with the parts that are your weaknesses in your training. Because when you're in those areas, you probably don't feel as motivated to do the training. It's been like,
Right.
oh, do I
It's
really
like,
have to do
yeah,
that? Do I
exactly,
really,
exactly.
really, really have to? I'll do it later on. But if you focus on the discipline and the routine, okay, you'll do it. You may not feel like motivated to do it, but you'll do it. And, gradually you'll, see those results in
Right,
that area over time. And I think that will also add in and build in that confidence as
right.
well.
And what do you enjoy the most in the triathlon training in general?
Yeah. So I haven't really done triathlon training in the past year or so, but I think for me it's being able to see the progress.
Yeah.
When things start to click and you're like, oh my God, yes. Especially
Yeah.
after you've gone through a period where you felt like, oh, I haven't really achieved anything or everything's just going down the pan. And then suddenly it's just like, whoo, wow, like everything's starting to click. I'm getting better at it. And wow,
Yeah.
this is amazing. Another thing for me as well is the confidence booster. So when I first started training for a triathlon, I had a phobia of deep water. And now when I do go open water swimming or when I go into the pool, I'm like, oh my God, just thinking about how far I have come to overcome that phobia is just like blows my mind.
Just shows how capable we are if we put our minds to it, right?
For
And
sure.
something that I've also noticed is that it's like, oh, I never thought this is something that I could be doing, or I never thought that this would be me. Or I mean, this goes also to representation as well. Like, for example, in those sports, it's not like you can see a lot of Black, Asian, or ethnic minorities there. I feel a sense of pride that to say, like, I'm holding this space as well.
Yeah.
I never thought that this is something that I would be doing.
Mm.
There's no one in my family or surrounding that is into one of these sports.
Own it.
And yeah, definitely. And this is why we're even having this conversation. But I'd like to know your thoughts with regards to the lack of representation and with your background and the type of work you do. What are your thoughts on that and how poorly represented we are in these sports?
I mean, first of all, the figures that are out there on the lack of physical activity among South Asian women in particular, it really doesn't surprise me. And I think it's a mixture of intercultural issues and barriers and patriarchal society, if you want to call it that, as well as external barriers as well. So, you know, I think in the UK, the recommended amount of physical activity is 150 minutes per week, but South Asian women, a large amount of South Asian women don't achieve anywhere near that amount. And there's so many reasons for that. You know, it's things like clothing. Tops might be too short, or there isn't a lot of modest clothing available for South Asian women, and for any Muslim South Asian women as well. There's very few brands that recognize that. And then another thing to add is that there aren't many places where women feel comfortable in terms of the physical and fitness spaces. A lot of places might have male instructors. So, you know, one thing that I found actually, there was pre-pandemic, I really wanted to set up this. It was a Bollywood version of a HIIT workout. And because I thought this might be a really cool way to get loads of South Asian women like more active. And when I put it to loads of gyms, they kept telling me, oh, you want a woman only class? That's no good. Like, you need to make it, what's it called, unisex. And so I kept getting loads of pushback. But actually, you know, a lot of South Asian women find it more comfortable being in women only spaces.
Feeling safe, these sports that requires you to be either on the road or in parks. And I have even noticed that I picked my place according to the surroundings. Can I run here? Do I feel that I feel safe running here? Which is maybe a question that a man would never think about. Maybe not never, but he wouldn't necessarily have to think, do I feel safe enough to run? It has been one of the criterias when I was looking at these different spaces. Do I feel comfortable to run, to cycle as well?
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that in some parts of London, cycling, I don't feel safe with the bike, because, you know, you hear so many horror stories about people being stolen their bike while they were on it, or very like scary ones like that. And so when you tell to family members that you're cycling, they're like, are you sure? Is it a good idea? It's unsafe. So the safety bit is truly something that everyone say, but I think that you can manage it if you think through where you're going to be running. Do you have those same like thought process when you go for a run or for a ride?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think politics does play a part into it. You know, I think particularly when Brexit was really taking momentum, you know, I noticed that when I would cycle into the countryside, there were certain areas where I really didn't feel safe, or felt like I didn't belong. And you could see it just from the faces and the expressions people were making when they saw you. And it would just be like, I need to ride on as quickly as possible because I clearly don't feel welcomed here. But safe to say, you know, I think that isn't the majority of the UK, at least. Obviously it's just like small pockets. It's just unfortunate when the fact that we have to think about that when planning. And then in terms of running, yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that I do is, you know, I put my Strava on private, and I have lots and lots of running routes on there. I think my Strava has like over 300 saved routes on there because I don't want to run the same route regularly. You know, this is just maybe me being over the top in terms of my being precaution, but yeah, I try and avoid taking the same routes regularly and, thinking about timing. But at the same time, I think part of it is just ingrained in me. And maybe actually it is safer than I'm, expecting. It's just ingrained in me. Okay, when I go out, make sure I do this, this, and this.
Right. Yeah. And then another option is to go with someone, and that's why having groups is a great thing, because if something does happen, that there's somebody who is there to kind of back you up, or who is there to support you. It's a pity that it's something that you have to keep in mind when you are training. And then what are other things that you think that are preventing women to actually be more active?
So I think perceptions of husbands and in-laws when it comes to women doing exercise, and also at the same time, if they're not looking after their children, it's like, because unfortunately with the majority of South Asian households, the house burden is predominantly lying with women. Right. And so if the woman isn't looking after their children, because she might want to go out and do swimming, running, cycling, strength training, whatever it is, there is a bit of people, that aspect of people looking down upon her. Oh, why aren't you with the children? And there's that aspect. And should you really be lifting weights? You might get bulky.
Oh my goodness, yes. How many times? And I think that sometimes some of the pushback or things that people would mention is like, oh, you're a woman, you shouldn't be, working out, because like you don't need to, or just stay home, or don't stay safe. And of course then the safety bit becomes the excuse, but then after, we're not empowering women to not be a victim of that. It empowers women to be a victim of feel unsafe, but it's more about how do we empower them to still go through, to go around it, right? Or find solutions for these. And then I was wondering, with regards to diet in the South Asian community, it's so diverse, right? So you could have like vegetarians, etc. And I'm thinking also, when I spoke to the dietitian, we spoke about, being vegetarian and how you have to think about the way you approach your training and just adjust accordingly. And now I'm thinking Ramadan is coming. Do you think that there's any adjustments to be made when you're training and you're fasting?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So with Ramadan, you definitely need to consider the timing of when you do your workouts. And then the other thing that you need to consider is the type of workout that you do. So for example, the best time would be to do your workout would be at suhoor, because that's pre-dawn meal. But I mean, in the UK, that is, 4:59 all the way to
super early.
3:52 a.m. So I don't really see a lot of people doing workouts then. So that's really not that realistic. But if you were to do it, in a hypothetical situation, someone who has the energy and the ability to do work, then it could be a low to medium intensity. We're not looking at anything strenuous. The next option, which probably would be a little bit more realistic for people, is 1 hour before iftar. And given the thing to consider is that given that you fasted over the past 9 hours or so, you're also going to be dehydrated, because remember, you haven't drunk water. So you also need to ensure that the workout that you do is at a lower intensity. You don't want to be pushing yourself. CrossFit iftar probably would be not the greatest thing to do, for example, for me. Or lifting heavy weights, or for you when you're cycling, not doing a really intense cycling session on Zwift or whatever you use. Instead, what you could do is an easy run or an easy bike ride. And you could also use that time to also maybe practice transitions. The
That's a good
next
point.
option would be after iftar. So after iftar, you've obviously eaten, you're obviously, as a result, more energized. So you could do a medium intensity session at this point as well. And then the final idea, the final point where you could potentially fit in a workout is after Tarawih, because at this point, this is when you could probably fit in a medium to higher intensity workout, because you've eaten, and then also you've got that window before Sehri as well. So
Which is
yeah,
basically when you can continue eating, basically, right?
yeah,
Recap is working out just before starting your fast.
yeah,
So you have the morning breakfast, or just before breaking your fast
yeah,
and after breaking your fast,
yeah.
right? In that sense, I hear you. So reduce the intensity. So what are the impact? Say you push yourself. What are potential risks?
Bearing in mind you fasted all day for a very long time and you also haven't drunk water, you will likely be more in the dehydrated side of things. So in that respect, you're probably prone to injury. And if you are going out too much at a really high intensity, you could faint, for example, which are things you don't want happening, if you're on your bike or out running. So it's about taking things easy. And the other thing that I would say is it's also about listening to your body, because as much as these are suggestions, I do know people who go out for a run or go out for a ride midday, and
Right.
for them it's okay, and it's also something that they've been doing for a long time, so they're also used to it. So listening to your body and knowing what works for you is also key, and knowing how much you can push yourself, and finding that right balance, if you are doing it during the day, is also important.
You just need to adjust and listen to your body. During Ramadan, it's also been being more conscious and being more in the present and taking it slow.
During Ramadan, it's not about making gains, getting stronger or getting faster. You're less likely to do so in a fasted state, because especially over the month, the fast will get longer, and so you'll get tired by the end of the month. So rather than focusing on gains, it's more focusing on maintenance and maintaining that fitness and just taking over your legs.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, it's also another outlet for being in a meditative
Exactly. Yeah.
state.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so last year I fasted, and this year I'm going to be fasting as well. And I realized that I'm so much more present in my workout than I used to be when I don't. And so I find it very empowering, actually looking forward, but we'll see how it goes. I'll update you. I'll update you. Well, thank you so much for the chat today, Mara. It was really good to be able to touch in so many different facets about, training. And this training is part of lifestyle medicine. It's physical exercise is medicine for
Yeah.
for life for me. But as we talked, we could see how it kind of touch upon social and societal issues, or sometimes around food, or around family and interactions, and how to balance everything. So it was really great speaking to you. But before we close off, we always like to ask these rapid fire questions. And so the first one is, what is the first sign that you recognize when you're out of balance?
I think for me, so as someone who loves to-do lists, the moment where I've stopped doing them and everything is just going crazy in my brain and I can't think and I can't concentrate, that is when I realize, wow, I'm out of balance. I need to sit down and just write it all down, write everything out, whatever it is, and just transfer it to a piece of paper. That's when I realize, yeah. And another thing is when I go to the gym and lift weights, and I just feel that transfer from whatever's happening in my brain to the weights just disappear. That's when I notice it.
Okay. And what is your coping mechanism like methods of coping when you're out of balance?
Yeah. So yeah, just touch on that. So yeah, lifting weights. For me, it's just, if I'm having a really stressful week or a busy period, then I love lifting weights. I think that really, really helps me in terms of coping with any imbalances. Also using a support network. Something that I really recommend both to my clients and I like doing with myself is, finding a group of people, whoever it is, your family, your friends, and just talking with them and just sharing how you're feeling. And they don't have to say anything. It's just someone who is a sounding board.
Right. Sometimes you just need to be able to not vent, but being able to share and express what has been like kind of sitting on your chest.
Yeah.
So it's that's a great advice. And what is one book that impacted your approach to wellness or well-being?
Mine is Raw by Dr. Stacy Sims.
Okay.
So that book is all about matching your food and your fitness to women's body.
Oh, okay.
I love that book. I love Dr. Stacy Sims. She really recognizes the difference that women's bodies are compared to men's. There aren't a lot of studies on women in the sports sector, and she really approaches that and tackles issues, like how do we what do we do with our menstruation cycle, and how do we approach workouts and fitness to that. And
yeah, I'm definitely gonna get it.
I highly recommend that book. So it's called Raw by Dr. Stacy Sims.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Mara. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and select that follow or subscribe button. For now, stay safe and we'll see you next week.